The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
There's a storm across the valley. The clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. I'm Priscilla Almquist Olsen, your host. Today is June 28th, 2024. And today we're continuing in the series interviewing candidates for District 2 of the Governor's Council. And District 2, Eastern is part of District 2, but there are totally 37 communities. It's a big district. And I don't know how these candidates are going to reach everybody, but we're going to try today at least to reach people in Easton. So pay attention, because on September 3rd, there'll be a primary. And Muriel Kramer is here with me. She's a Democrat. And there are 3 other Democrats who are running. So it's a big field. So she's got a lot of competition. So I want you to listen carefully, because you have to decide who you feel will best represent you in this position. Welcome, Muriel Kramer.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being here.
Tell me, now you're from Hopkinton.
I am from Hopkinton. I've lived in Hopkinton for a little over 30 years. My husband and I have raised our 6 children in Hopkinton. And I have also served in town government for over 20 years in elected and appointed positions in Hopkinton.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit beforehand. The most important, it's planning. That's true, because you have to analyze and evaluate. And the job at Governor's Council is to analyze and evaluate the judges who are you're going to recommend to the governor to appoint. So that comes in handy. Then you were on the select board, and that involves so much evaluating and analyzing and delivering and studying and making proposals and all of that stuff. But you were chair for half of your 6 years, right?
I was. I served 2 separate terms on the Hopkinton Select Board, and I was chair for a total of 3 of those 6 years.
Okay. And so how do you feel that is helping you to run for this job and do the job?
So I think some of that experience, executive level leadership in the public's view, is a different sort of way to serve and to work and participate. So in many ways, I think the exposure of needing to work in the public, in the municipal arena, with, mindful of transparency, mindful of processes, mindful of serving, right? When we get elected to particular positions, we are elected to serve all people, right? All constituents. And that is its own kind of work, to make sure that you're really thinking about the ways that your decisions as an elected official impact many. And we really, you need to set your personal objectives aside many times to evaluate all of the information, to consider each of the appointees across a spectrum of priorities, in order to really be serving constituents, actually statewide. So judges impact people statewide.
Yes,
certainly.
And so when you evaluate a judge, what are you looking at?
So experience, certainly. Temperament, certainly. I know those are words that are thrown out typically. So it does need to be someone who can interact in a high-pressure situation with a certain sense of, a certain level ability to control. And also, I would say, much like an elected official, they are appointed, but much like an elected official, they don't are not supposed to represent just their own viewpoint. They're supposed to take in the circumstances and viewpoints of their constituents, of the law certainly, but founded in the law, but also taking into consideration the circumstances of the people that are in front of them, whose lives they impact so directly.
Are there certain groups of people that you feel are under or neglected or under cared for or need additional protection from judges?
Yes. So in my work as a social worker, I'm a social worker. We didn't necessarily start there.
I'm sorry, you said you're a social worker?
I'm a social worker.
A social worker. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that opens up a whole bag of wonderful ideas. Let's hear a few.
Wonderful ideas. And I got my start in homelessness services in Boston and Cambridge. So interacted with a lot of really deep needs, interacted with a lot of people. Let's just stick with people experiencing homelessness. So that constituency group, certainly not a homogeneous group, but that constituency group with that particular set of challenges would be overrepresented in the judicial system. They are more often actually run afoul of the laws because laws are established in such a way that it is hard to experience homelessness and always be lawful, right? You can't loiter in a business establishment. If you need to get warmer, you need to get cool. It's hard to find a place where you might attend to your bodily needs. Just finding a place to go to the bathroom can be challenging if you're experiencing homelessness, to do it in a legal way. So there's all kinds of ways. A lot of people experiencing homelessness are mentally ill, or struggling with mental illness or substance use disorder, or a combination of that. We know, the research tells us, and we know anecdotally, we know intuitively, that folks experiencing substance use disorder and mental illness are highly overrepresented in our jails and prisons and court systems. So how do we affect change? How do we make sure that the same legal system that we count on to presume that we are innocent until we're found guilty, to interact with us in a certain way, ways that we experience the legal system can be very different than the ways many people experience the legal system. We know that BIPOC individuals, folks that are Black or of color, are horrifically overrepresented in the justice system from start to finish. And it's a compounding insult as people are enrolled in that system. People who, LGBTQ people are overrepresented in this system. It has become, in the United States of America, a system of social control for people who have concerns. People who are economically disadvantaged are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. So I come from a background of my first experience really working in the social justice realm is with folks experiencing homelessness. I also, when I was in school, and then for a period of years following school, I was on the board of the Massachusetts Bail Fund. The Massachusetts Bail Fund was a fledgling organization when I was an intern. I was at Boston College, and I was an intern for the Massachusetts Bail Fund. And something that people don't think about, I didn't think about. I went back to school really to get involved in social justice work. And I didn't think about bail as being a real impediment to people's freedom. But it is. And it also is overburdensome for people, almost makes all kinds of sense, who have a hard time with their economic status, right? So if you and I, hypothetically, if you and I had an interaction with the legal system and we had to post bail or go to jail, we would post bail. And we could probably, worst case, we could probably gather friends and relatives to help us gather the resources in order to do that. It's something that we don't think about because it isn't our experience, perhaps. But I guess I don't want to go around and around too much, but at any given time in Massachusetts, tens of thousands of people are incarcerated either in jails or prisons or the federal system, youth detention, civil detention, and approximately 50% typically are there pre-trial because they can't afford bail.
Mm. Okay, and so you come with an understanding of the ordinary person and the person of color and the homeless and so forth. And so when you look at a judge, what do you expect to find if you're going to recommend him or her to the governor?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask, I think, different questions. So I'm going to interact with the person. So when you're on the Governor's Council, you have an opportunity to meet with each of the candidates independently. You have an opportunity to interact with, their materials, their resumes, their legal record, and their materials. And then, of course, there is the public hearing. When the public, by the way, the public is invited to attend. The public can interact and ask questions. I'm just going to say that, so that if you start to get invested and interested in this, you can participate. And I always encourage people to get educated and participate. There's a live stream function. You can watch all of the Governor's Council's actions, either real time or on recordings. So I want, post George Floyd's murder, when there's this really great national reckoning and understanding of the impacts of systemic racism in the criminal justice system, from the police to the prisons, it's important that we elevate that conversation and we make sure that our candidates for the future judgeships can interact with the impacts of systemic racism. So we know that Black persons and people of color are represented 6 times more highly in the prison systems in Massachusetts and not more likely to commit crimes. This is the research. So there is a problem, a really big problem that we all have to invest in and solve.
Wow. So you are going to be looking at those judges to see if they are sensitive to all those issues that are important to you, and I'm sure important to the voters. People want to be treated fairly. People have a right to be treated fairly.
Correct.
And our Constitution requires that. So, but sometimes people slip between the, whatever that is, between the whatevers.
Yeah, between the seams, maybe, right?
Yeah. Having a senior moment here.
Yeah.
But anyway, you before we went on air, you talked about your childhood and your first occurrence, the first time you met the court system.
Yeah.
And you were 12 years old. Tell me a little bit about that, and how does that impact today on your choice to run for the Governor's Council?
Yeah, thank you. So I've never really publicly told this story, but my parents went through a very contentious divorce. I have an older brother, 3 years my senior. I have a younger brother, 7 years my junior. And when in the process of getting their divorce, it started when my dad left when I was 7 and didn't conclude until I was 16 or 17. So people have to understand that the laws were very different all those years ago. I won't admit to my age totally, but so I had made the decision. It was a very chaotic and difficult time. I had made the decision that I wanted to live with my father, and I actually ran away from home in order to try and affect that change.
And you were 12.
I was 12. I was a 7th grader, a rising 8th grader. And the court system promptly sent me back to my mom, of course, but it did instigate a process that I ended up in a process that I hope is not mirrored today, but I was actually in a courtroom on a stand testifying. My mother was testifying, my father was testifying. It was a really harsh environment. But I guess the point of the story is that my dad was awarded custody, and it was what I wanted. It was what was the right decision for me at the time, certainly. And that judge had to make a decision that was different than had ever been made before. I'm told that decision set case law in Massachusetts. I've never done the research, so I can't tell you that is absolutely so. But I do know that that it felt like my future depended on somebody being able to think critically a little bit outside the norms and the boundaries of the day, to make a decision that turned out to be really meaningful and healthy for me.
So that judge was somebody who cared about the consequences of his decision, as well as caring about children. And was willing to listen to a child. Now, when you're 12, you're on the cusp of, a teenager. You're not exactly a child.
Yeah.
You're starting to think for yourself at that age. I used to teach 12 and 13-year-olds English, so I know all about it. And but they can be very grown up, some of them, beyond their years. And I believe you were probably that child. And so you were really grateful for that judge. So is that one thing that you expect to find in the judges that you review? Their sensitivity, their ability to listen carefully and weigh all the consequences before they make a decision?
Yeah, and it's bigger than that. It's having a growth mindset, being able and being able to be the first, and take that chance. And it's being able to confront your implicit biases, right? That's something that we have come into understanding never more so than today. And we have to stop, and we have to really think about, I don't know what that judge's personal experiences are. I don't know what he was thinking personally, but in order to meet my needs and encounter my unique set of circumstances, it required him to set aside some of what he might have thought as normative and typical for
Well,
the
sure,
day.
let's face it, at that time when you were 12, there was no question but the mother got custody.
Correct. In fact, the reason that it took so long for my folks to get divorced is because it wasn't possible in the day for my father to file for divorce under the circumstances. It's just a different day. We have so many more rights and freedoms, and that extends to men, women, or folks across the binary, obviously, in different ways, in ways that we don't necessarily think about unless there are experiences and we've experienced them.
So this has really impacted your childhood. It's come forward to give you a real sense of looking inside the mind of the judges that you're going to be reviewing. I suppose your questions too, when you have those judges, potential candidates for judgeship in front of you, you're going to be asking them questions that really bring out their feelings and maybe even their biases.
So that's what we hope, right? So that's having biases is not good or bad. It just is for all of us. So that's the hope, is that the conversations are real and grounded, and that we appoint judges for all courts, civil courts, family courts, criminal courts, for all courts. We appoint judges who can really think in complex ways about the situations and circumstances and people that are in front of them as they're making their decisions. So one of my hopes, right, is to elevate the conversation about diversion to treatment versus straight incarceration. Restorative justice practices that help people, whoever they are in front of you, become more healthier and more whole, no matter what their past circumstance was. And it can be challenging. It's an intentional act to interact with a human being whose experiences are not like your own. It's an intentional act. So those are my questions. How do you, with intentionality, ensure that you are really thinking through the circumstances of the case in your decision making, but also making sure you see the person in front of you authentically, and you see their experiences authentically, and you interact with, yes, whatever, if there is something that they need to be held accountable for, yes. But the larger, harder question too is that every judge candidate that comes before us is going to be a product of the system. And whether or not Massachusetts has the best system in the United States or not, I think that it does in very many ways, measurable ways. We still have seen the prison and jail population balloon by 300% in the last 30 years. So it's also about an individual's willingness to really critically interact with, knowing that they have been part of a system that has harmed people, and that big changes need to be made. Not that anybody ever sets out, I'm a social worker, and there are times in history we can point to that the social work profession has hurt people, has not done a great job, right? And when that happens, when we find out that the ideas and the solutions that we thought were perfect, when we thought separating children from families was the best first bet, I mean, we know better now. You have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to course correct. So how are those judges interacting, judge candidates, clerk magistrate candidates, parole board candidates? They're all important, powerful positions in this great mechanism, legal mechanism. And how do they interact with the actual knowledge that we have disadvantaged poor and people of color and people with disease states systemically for decades? How do we right the ship together?
Wow, those are powerful words. It's a powerful statement. I think we should end there. And I want to wish you best of luck. Muriel Kramer.
Muriel Kramer.
And you spell Kramer, Kramer?
I do. And also people need to know they have to turn over that ballot September, and that governor's counselors candidates are listed as counselors. Oh. It's a little convoluted and potentially confusing, but please go to the ballot in September, not just to vote for Muriel Kramer, but definitely stay long enough to vote for Muriel Kramer, but vote for all those candidates that we know we need going forward, starting with Joe and Kamala.
Thank you so much, Muriel Kramer, for being with us today, and best of luck on your journey.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll have you back. And
I would love it.
Yes, because you've been on many journeys, and this one seems to be a fit for your background, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime soon.
One of my daughters, I'll just end with this, my oldest daughter, who got me started in my social justice journey. When I told her that the governor's council position was open, she went, "Mom, that's your spot."
Well,
so I hope that's true.
And maybe the viewers who have heard Muriel Kramer today will agree with your daughter that that's your spot. Thank you again for joining me. This is Priscilla Almquist Olsen bidding you farewell. Until next time, be well.